This is one of those few times where easy, cheap, and delicious all coincide. Carnitas are a classic Mexican dish that we know and love well in the States. Unfortunately, I didn't get to try them while I was in Mexico, but I'm pretty sure I know how they should taste. There are many different ways to cook this, but it's basically just slow cooked pork shoulder. And like I said, pork shoulder is a cheap cut of meat, and this dish doesn't require a lot of culinary skill at all, but the results are still astonishing. I'm going to show you my method, which just uses a slow cooker or a crock pot. The only variable you really need here is time. This can easily all be done in one day, but when I use my crock pot, I like to start my process the night before if I can. It just makes it effortless and seamless on the day of. So I'm starting with a couple of pieces of pork shoulder. I had one small chunk left over in my freezer, and I just bought another from the grocery store. I had like 4.5 pounds in total, so that's like 2 kilograms. I'm not going to trim these whatsoever because I want all that fat to be part of the braise. The only thing I am going to do is cut these down into smaller, sizable chunks. We're going to cut these further after cooking, but for now, this is going to help us fit this better into the crock pot. A lot of recipes call for lots of oil in the braise. I might be doing a little less than those, but I am going to take this opportunity to oil my pork chunks. This will add oil content to the braise, but it's also going to help the seasonings to stick. So I just coat this generously in some neutral oil and rub it around. And for seasonings, I start with lots of kosher salt and freshly ground black pepper. I'm not really measuring here because we're going to adjust this after they're done cooking, but just know in advance that this amount of pork is going to take a lot of seasoning to taste good. You could stop there with seasoning and be fine, but I'm going to add a little bit more of a rub, which I'm going to grind together homemade. I'm going to start with about a teaspoon of cumin seeds that I'm going to drop into a dry pan. I just give these a toast for about 2 to 3 minutes on medium heat. It really brings out all their flavor and tastes better than the powdered stuff. Then I'm going to add these to my molcajete. Alternatively, you could do this all on a spice grinder, but I don't have one. Then I'm also adding in about a teaspoon of Mexican oregano, and then finally about a tablespoon of achiote seeds. This is optional and I got it from my Hispanic market, but it mainly enhances the nice brown color of the final dish, but it also provides a subtle earthy flavor which I like with the pork. So I just take a minute to grind all those up into a pretty fine powder, and I'll dump that all over my pork chunks and rub it in evenly. Then I'll grab my plastic lined crock pot and nestle all these pork chunks in. They're fine to lay on top of each other, just make sure that everything's level and even. I'm also going to take a whole yellow onion that I've chopped the stem and root off of, and I leave the skin on this and just chop it into very rough chunks, which I then scatter all around inside of the crock pot. Then I grab a cinnamon stick and break it into a few pieces with my hand and then toss that in, followed by about 6 to 8 peeled garlic cloves, and finally just a couple of chipotles and adobo from a can that I have. I kind of chop those up and smear them all around the top layer of pork. Now the rest of the ingredients I'm going to add in the morning right before cooking because I don't want the acidity to react with the pork overnight. But like I said, you can do all this at the same time right before you cook. But anyway, the next morning I'm going to chop an orange into quarters. As best as I can, I'm going to squeeze the juices into the crock pot and toss the slices in as well. And then I'm going to pour in maybe 1/3 of a cup of apple cider vinegar. I love the tart sourness and tanginess that this brings to dishes, especially pork dishes. And then I'm going to add enough water to almost coat all of the pork. Some recipes will do this all in oil like confit, but mine's going to be more like a braise with more liquid. That being said, I'm just going to add a little bit more oil to this mixture. I probably ended up with about 1/3 of a cup of neutral oil in total here. And then lastly, I would have added these earlier, but I had to go to the grocery store to get them. I'm going to break in like 3 bay leaves and scatter that all around. So my recipe is a little heavier on the ingredients than some are. In my opinion, the main ingredients you need to accomplish this dish are the salt, the onion, the orange, the bay leaves, and the oil. You can kind of customize the rest how you'd like to. But this is ready to cook. I'm going to set this to 8 hours on low. Ideally, you want to be around for this cook because you want to be able to check on this and stop it early if you need to, which you'll see I'm going to do. But I'm going to do nothing for about 4 hours and then I'll come back halfway through the cook. And at this point, I'm just going to flip over that top layer of pork because some of those pieces were exposed. You can risk them drying out if they sit out of the liquid the whole time. And the pork still feels really tough and rubbery at this point, so we know it's not close to being done. So back to cook for a few more hours until about 6.5 hours in total. I came in with my tongs and saw that the pork was starting to fall apart, and that's where I wanted to stop. I don't want it to be completely shreddable and just fall apart as soon as I touch it because of what we're going to do next to finish the cooking. So methods like sous vide or braising or slow cooking are great, but one thing they don't do is trigger a Maillard reaction. That's the delicious browning that you get from direct cooking on top of a stovetop or a grill, or from under a broiler, which we're going to do today. So I'm going to carefully remove all my pork chunks with some tongs, trying not to break them apart too much, and I'll just scatter them onto a cutting board. And I shouldn't have a problem cutting through these at this point because they should be plenty tender. So this is the final cut we're going to make to get these down to the bite-sized chunks that we're going to put on the tacos or however else we're going to eat this. I like mine pretty fairly large, but you can go whatever size you want here. I'm just spreading these evenly on a foil-lined baking sheet, and then I'll put this directly under my oven broiler on high. Just keep an eye on it and move it around to make sure that everything is getting browned evenly, but after about 5 to 7 minutes, you should have this beautifully shiny and sizzling crispy pork. Don't skip this step because it's going to add so much flavor to what we've already created. Back at the crock pot, I'm going to use a strainer or slotted spoon to remove all the solids from the liquid. We can remove these as they've released all their flavor into the braising liquid, and I do want to save my braising liquid, but I don't need all of it for this pork here, so I'm going to ladle out most of it into one of these deli containers containers, and then I'll dump all my pork back in, and then I'll add a few ladlefuls of the gravy back into the pot. This is just going to ensure that our pork stays juicy and not dry, but we don't want it to be swimming. Also save that sauce because you can make tons of things with it. But yeah, that's going to be it. That's your carnitas. You can keep this on the warm setting and just serve this whenever you'd like to. I was bringing this to a gathering, but I had to test some of this on camera. So I grabbed a corn tortilla and warmed it up, and I added a little bit of that beautiful pork and topped with some green onion for color pop because I didn't have any cilantro or onion to add on top, but that's okay. This pork can be eaten by itself and be delicious. But let's try it on camera just to be sure. Who doesn't love a little sweet tea? Okay, so as usual, I'm taking this to a church gathering in just a little bit, but I'm gonna try one of these on camera. The pork is just so juicy and tender, but those edges have crisped up to perfection. You already know this is gonna be good. Cheers. Well, man, pork is really just a hack of a meat. It comes with all of its built-in flavors, with all the fattiness. It's really hard to mess it up. It's very forgiving, and it's one of the cheapest meats out there. You get plenty enough flavor in just the pork that you don't need a sauce. You can always add one, but there's so much you can do with just this pork with the leftovers if you don't feel like eating tacos forever. Just one of the easiest things you can do in your kitchen. I know a lot of you guys like the slow cooker recipes. There's really no prep to this. You just chop a couple of things and throw it into a slow cooker, like 5 minutes. No searing or marinating or doing any of that. Also, my mic seems to pick up a lot better audio when I'm wearing this dry fit shirt as opposed to my cotton shirts. I might start doing that for all my taste tests, or I might get a better mic. This is a cheap Amazon mic, but if you guys have suggestions, let me know for something like a lapel mic. But if you like this video or you learned something or you just had a good time, let me know. If you want to see more stuff you can put into a taco, I can do more videos like this, or just any other recipe you'd like to see, hit me up. Thank you guys for watching, be blessed, and I'll see y'all next time. Destroyed in seconds.